Welcome to the LaunchFamily Podcast, where we bring expert-backed guidance to real parenting moments. I'm your host, Shelley, a former teacher and mom of six, and today's guest is someone I couldn't be more excited to introduce. Jaci Finneman is the creator of No Problem Parenting, a powerful, practical mindset approach that helps parents shift from reactive chaos to calm confidence. With over 30 years of experience supporting families, including high-conflict homes, child protection cases, and your everyday overwhelmed parent, Jaci knows how to make parenting feel less impossible. In this episode, we'll talk about how to pause in the heat of the moment, what to say instead of saying sorry, and how to raise resilient kids without burning out. Jaci, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jessica. This is so fun. I'm super excited to be just in the company of LaunchFamily in general. You guys are all amazing over at LaunchFamily. And I will say my last name is Finneman. A lot of people call me Fineman, and I don't mind. If I'm going to be Fineman, though, I'm going to be the fine woman. But I usually say it's Finneman, rhymes with cinnamon, but I'm not a spice girl.
So I want to talk a little bit more about your journey and how you got into supporting parents. So can you walk us through how you went from in-home mental health work to launching No Problem Parenting?
Yeah, it was like truly not on mental health work was not on my radar growing up at all. It wasn't like the thing I wanted to be when I grew up was a counselor or anything like that. I actually wanted to have a big family. I'm one of over 100 first cousins. My mom is one of 15 kids. My dad is one of 9. And so between those two families, I have over 100 first cousins. And my mom did daycare. There's 5 in my family, so it was just not affordable for, kids. And plus, mom just loved kids. So we had the 5 of us plus another 10 or 15 daycare kids or neighborhood kids. Our yard was the yard to come to play. And I always loved, I'm a middle child. I wanted to be mom's helper. I went grocery shopping with her at 5:00 on Saturday mornings. I wanted to be the boss. I wanted to be with the other little daycare kids and be helpful. And started babysitting at the age of 9. So I always just kind of wanted to be like my mom and have a big family. That was not in the plan for me. That comes years later, but we have one amazing 20-year-old kiddo now and 2 angel babies. But my mom also, once all of his kids were in school, then she started working as a paraprofessional in the school district with kids with special needs. And so I was like, well, then that's what I'm going to do when I graduate high school. As I put myself through college, my goal was to become a special ed director. That was like the ultimate goal for me. But a couple of years into doing the paraprofessional work at the school system, the agency that helped one of the little girls with Down syndrome asked if I would be willing to do some after school care with her. And so I'd have to get be hired at this other company. And I was like, sure, I just love this little kiddo. And so I said I would do that. And then a few months into that, they said, well, we have another kid that needs some extra care after school, but she has reactive attachment disorder, not like a typical disability kind of special need, but more of a mental health need. And I was like, I don't have any idea what that reactive a what? I don't have any idea what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I turned it down. I had plenty of other things to do as waitressing on the weekends, going to college, all the things. And they called again, and then they called again. And this girl had been kicked out of schools and group homes, and no one could take her. And so they needed legit full-time care for her at her house. And so I went to the public library, and because there was no Google back then, I had to look it up on microfiche, and I Googled reactive attachment disorder. And on the severe end of reactive attachment disorder is like Charles Manson. So for those of you that don't know, he was a serial killer, was really good at luring people in and getting people to, he thought he was Jesus basically, right? But Charles had been in 25 foster homes by the age of 10. So, how could he learn that adults were safe, that, how to trust and love and reciprocate and feel and do all those things? It's by the age of 10, 25 foster homes. That's insane in and of itself. So that freaked me out. On the way opposite end of attachment is the kiddos who have separation anxiety and cannot be away from their parents, right? This kiddo was kind of in that moderate range, kind of between the two at 10 years old. And so I talked to her parents. I was really intrigued. They sounded super amazing, mom and stepdad. So I made an appointment, went to their home by myself, knocked on their door, and walked on their wooden front porch and then knocked on the door, and the mom answers the door and she says, "Here she is. She's all yours. Dad and I are going out for a break." And I was like, what in the heck? No wonder why this kid has problems. Like, that was extreme. And that's not at all who I talked to on the phone last night, you know? And here's this fair skinned, blue eyed, blonde haired kiddo that just was charming and red, rosy cheeks and just little cutie. I'm like, what in the heck is wrong with these people? Like, she just looks so sweet. So I proceeded to hang out with her and get to know her for about 45 minutes, played some Barbies, did some things. And I was just so curious, like, this is Jekyll and Hyde. What's going on? The parents came back in, they got her ready for bed, and then we sat down on the couch and I got to hear their story. The story of how this little girl had been with her birth mom till her 1-year birthday when dad could finally get custody of her, and all the neglect that she had experienced. And I also learned that when I walked onto their wooden front porch coming to their house, she had been throwing a screamer for about 2.5 hours before I got there. And so her parents were just waiting for me to get there, right? Waiting for a break. The minute she heard those footsteps, not knowing I was coming, and the knock on the door, she could shut that screamer off just like that.
Mm.
Well, her parents couldn't shut the screamer off just like that, right? Like their intensity of their emotion and all their things. So they were frantic, and she just instantly was like calm and put on her charming little self. And so once I learned that, and then the 2 months following that, I worked with her more and more and more. And eventually her true colors kind of came through as she trusted me enough to show me her behaviors, right?
Mm.
And that's when I decided I needed to go all in and research that diagnosis. And that really set the stage for me to go all in with all things mental health. But that first family that I worked with a kiddo with a mental health diagnosis, they really were my first mentors. They were the reason that I became fascinated and intrigued not only with mental health, but in supporting parents. Because I think too often, you can have a diagnosis, you can have therapy, you can have classroom teachers, daycare providers helping your child and working with your kiddo. But too often, I think as parents, we're sort of not understood, acknowledged, validated, or heard. And so from that point on, which is like 1992, I was all in with helping parents.
Wow. What an incredible journey too of like transformation of like starting like babysitting and seeing your mom and paraprofessional, and then like it kind of just all continued on through that path. You had mentioned that you worked with some incredibly high stress families, and maybe that first one being one of those. What patterns did you start to notice and kind of start to see across all parenting styles?
Yeah, so it was really interesting. After we eventually got the help that this kiddo needed out in another state. And so I was kind of out of a job because eventually I was working with that family like 40 hours or more a week. And then one of their in-home family counts therapists had reached out to me and said, "Hey, what are you doing for work now? Are you back at the school system?" And I said, "Actually, yes, and I'm back at school, but I said I'm really interested in doing something more." And she said, "Why don't you come work for us at this counseling agency, at this nonprofit?" And I said, "Well, because I don't have a degree, and I had not taken as many classes, and I actually was not learning in my college education. I wasn't into like all the good courses yet, and they couldn't teach me about attachment disorder like I could learn being hands-on and direct with the families and the therapeutic homes that I had shadowed foster parents in and such. And so I ended up applying. I had the high school degree and the 6,000 hours of supervised experience. I took another year to become a mental health practitioner, and they actually probably would have even supported me in finishing my degree, but I ended up leaving that because I decided at that point I didn't want to be a therapist. I
Mm.
wanted to continue in this role of doing skills counseling and coaching with the kids and the parents. That's where my heart was, and that's just where I wanted to stay. And so I started at that agency in 1995, and I worked with a good 10 years with child protection families. So parents who were trying really hard to keep their kiddos in the home, but maybe the kid was really destructive, and or parents who were at risk of losing their child or needed to be reunified. And so I worked with that population. I worked with kiddos with depression, anxiety, kiddos on the spectrum. I mean, just all encompassing. and families that had, healthy kids, great, mentally healthy kids, like no issues. And then they had that one kid that was really challenging. And so across the board, no matter who I worked with, I did learn that when parents are supported, advocated for, confident, most importantly, we can boost them up and help them know that they've got this. They are the expert of their child. Whether or not they know everything, you don't have to know everything. I mean,
Mhm.
who of us? I was a counselor for 20 years and had a kid and then a parenting coach, and I didn't know everything, right? Life throws us curveballs. Our kids certainly do. But when we feel confident and supported, we do better and our kids do better.
Mm.
So that's confidence is key, not calm. Ooh, I almost cringe when I hear the word calm, right? Because I don't think there's calm is like maybe the goal sometimes, but it's not really realistic,
That's true.
to be calm in parenting. They freak us out all the time, or they do things that like, so I think it's just more about being confident and not so much calm.
Yeah. Like I can do this. I can handle whatever's going to happen because we know that things are going to happen that we could never anticipate.
For sure. So the official name of my company is actually Hello World LLC. And that's a whole nother story you can hear on episode 32 of the No Problem Parenting podcast to get all of the details on that, which is it's a really cool story. But after I left the agency that I worked for after 20 years and started Hello World in November of 2013. And then and really was focusing on helping those families who had kids with attachment issues. And they didn't have to have the diagnosis, but, tougher kind of situations. And then about 3 or 4 years into it, parents were coming to me and saying, well, hey, if you can help those families, like with really tough situations, why can't you help me with my kid who's wet noodling on the floor in Target or at risk of getting kicked out of daycare for biting or, that kind of stuff. And I said, well, I don't know, because I'm a parent and I need support too. Like, who am I to say I'm an expert on all things parenting, right? But I entertained it and I opened it up to having any family come to me that had any kind of challenge or issue. And after doing that for a couple of years, I started to notice some common themes, things I was saying to any parent that I was coaching, right? Whether their kid had a mental health diagnosis or not. And so in 2018, I went back, I record all my sessions. I've been doing virtual sessions since 2016, actually, before it was popular, right? Before the COVID. Um,
Right here.
and so I went back. I don't keep the video, but I keep the audio typically, right, for notes and things like that. And so I went back in that whole year. Where was AI back then? And I listened to hundreds of hours of sessions in any chance I could, and pulled out 3 common themes of things that I wanted every parent to know.
Mm.
And from that, I created No Problem Parenting. I had to have a name for it. And I was like, what do I call this? These three key things that I want every parent to know. And no problem kept popping in my head. And I was like, oh, I don't even really like no problem. I used to be a no problem person. Like anybody would ask me, I was a doer, a fixer, a solver, a helper, like no problem. I'll take it. I got it. And I'd jump in when people didn't even ask. Right. And eventually that caught up with me. So I'm not a big no problem person, like, oh, no problem. Because sometimes taking on too much is a problem.
Mhm.
But the phrase kept coming into my head. So I just decided I was going to look it up in the dictionary. And I looked up the word problem in the dictionary, and it says that a problem is a matter or a situation that's unwelcome or harmful and needing to be dealt with and overcome. So I was like, well, it's right in the definition. Problems are meant to be dealt with and overcome, right? So, but what do? We find a problem, back talking, lying, stealing, biting, hitting, going out at night, drinking, and we feed that problem. We make that problem the center of the universe and we go all in with that situation and we just awfulize it and it's bad enough, right? But we make it worse and worse and worse. And then we add stress and irritability and frustration and, all the things on top of it. And so what I help parents do is give that problem only as much attention as it deserves. That problem is just a little piece of your kiddo. And it might be a big piece right? There might be several problems, but let's give those problems only as much attention as they deserve. And then as we say in the Midwest, we keep her moving. We don't want to add fuel to the fire. We don't want to feed into those problems. We don't want to have that problem consume our kiddo or their identity or any of that. We're just going to be really matter of fact about it, deal with it, overcome it, and keep her moving. So
Oh my
that's what
gosh.
no problem parenting is about.
That's an incredible, like, and what a mindset shift. Like, I'm listening to you describe this and I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. Because when there is a problem, like, even, like in my days as a classroom teacher, right? We would have like behavior logs or behavior charts, and it's usually focused on like one specific thing. And like, that's the only thing that we're talking about is behavior. Forget academics, forget social stuff. It's like, you just like zone in on the problem. That's the only thing that you could ever think about when it comes to your child is that specific problem that you're trying to overcome. But then at the
Yeah.
same time, you become, like, obsessed about it, or, like, the teacher is obsessed about it, and you're like, "What are we doing?" Where's the
Yeah,
balance?
I know. It's so true. And as an in-home family counselor, the 20 years at the counseling agency, we did all in-home services. So we went right to the families' houses to do the counseling for their kids or teach the skills or whatever. And it's a wonderful program and agency, right? Loved it. But the system kept changing. And when mental health went into medical model, and then we had to have measurable goals, and we had to have, I'm like, and I get we need checks and balances and things like that. But it got to be where I couldn't see a kid or I couldn't see a parent without a child present because the child was our patient, our client, right? And so, but I didn't want the kid there when the parent was telling me about the negative behaviors or the struggles they had that week. The kid didn't need to hear about it again or have that fed to him. And I didn't want the kiddo there when I was coaching the parent on something to do or something to try. Because I'm telling you, this happened all the time. When we had to do that, right, as the system changed, I would coach the parents, I'd leave, the parent would try something, and the kid would say, well, that's not how Jackie said to say it.
Gosh.
Well, that's not how Jackie said to do it. And now they're in an argument over who's right and who heard me and who's, I'm like, what is happening with that? So, I made it an effort to get that to change, and that couldn't happen. I'm one little person in a big system. So that was eating at me for several years. And finally, at a conference I was at, I had made a goal that one day I was going to start my own company, and I was going to call it Hello World, and its mission was going to be awakening family attachment. And a few years later, that's exactly what I did.
My gosh. I mean, there's so many good nuggets already. I can't wait to dive deeper into some of the strategies and mindset shifts that you have as part of your program as well. So I know another one of those mindset shifts is, as you mentioned, also going from the feeling of needing to solve everything to instead starting to just observe what's happening. So can you walk us through a little bit about why that's important and how does that actually look in the day to day?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we want to pave the road for our kids. We want to make things easier for them. We don't want them to go through hardships. And unfortunately, it's in the hardships or the tough things that we build our confidence and our ability, our courage to deal with and overcome hard things. So, but often parents, we advocate for our kids and we just want things to be easier for them. In my 3-step approach, real quick, seek first to understand. We need to get to the root of the behavior problem or of what's going on. And this is a made up stat. I say it all the time, but I say 90% of the time the behavior problem that the kid's displaying is not the actual problem. It's a coping skill. I think behaviors are coping skills, coping mechanisms for something else. So let's get to the root of what is causing that your child's behavior. And then the second part of seek first to understand is why am I responding or more often reacting the way that I am as the parent? We have buttons. And if you didn't think you had a button when you became a parent, your kids are going to find it and they're going to discover it for you, right? And so we need to really seek first to understand why are we responding or more often reacting to a certain behavior the way that we are. So we got to it starts with us. That whole work on ourselves and mindset shift, right? It doesn't have to be rocket science or therapy. It just needs to be what's happening with me, and let's take a look at that because I'm the leader. So I really have to have my poop in a group, as my mom used to say. Doesn't mean I can't lose my cool. Doesn't mean I'm not going to yell at my kids or sometimes do things I wish I wouldn't. Some stuff comes out, but we do want to take a look at that. And then step 2, we want to prepare for the worst. We can't always be prepared. Life throws us curveballs. Our kids most certainly do. But there are those day in and day out challenges are going to happen when you tell them no, when you pick them up from school, when you try to get them to bed or set a curfew, right? Those are the things we can observe in step 3. We can observe and notice those behaviors. We don't have to join in and match their emotion. We don't have to be as amped up as they are. It doesn't have to be as passionate to us. So we can notice the behaviors, notice what's going on, observe the wet noodle tantrum in the middle of the floor without trying to get them to stop or calm down, and just observe it for a minute without saying or doing anything or trying to solve it. If you just sit and watch your kiddo throw a tantrum, making sure they're safe, right? But like not doing it, eventually they just kind of look at you like, aren't you going to do anything? And that in of itself sometimes, but when we, solves it, sometimes we're like jumping in and trying to get them to stop. Well, when I'm stinking mad and spitting tacks, it's not very often that somebody trying to convince me to stop or bribe me or do what is really going to work. It's probably not. I need a minute to just get it out of my system. So in step 3, we do a lot of changing the conversation. We lead with empathy, not sympathy. There's a time and a place to feel sorry for kids. But we don't want to stay in that sympathy very long, because sympathy can be victimizing. And we want to give empathy so we can empower our kids and let them know how capable they are, how we know that they can get through this or that they can do the right thing. And then we want to lead with conditional, believe it or not, conditional factual positives, factual praise, not all this unconditional, good job, you have friends, you're great, here's a ribbon. Kids, it doesn't make them feel, maybe in the moment it makes them feel better, but it doesn't really. And especially as they get older, they're keen to like, oh, you just have to say that because you're my mom. If a kid says, I don't have any friends, and what do we say? Of course you do, honey. You have this person and this person. If your kid doesn't feel like a good friend and they really don't think they have friends, we're just blowing hot air, and they aren't going to trust that we can handle the fact that they might not actually have friends. Right? Yeah. If we can't handle it, how in the world are they supposed to handle it? So instead, we want to lead with conditional praise, factual praise. And so we pick an example, like we say, oh, well, remember the other day we were at the park and Joe fell down and skunned his knee? You ran right over there to see if he was okay. That's what a good friend does. I think you're a good friend. That's something that even in the moment they might try to dispute or whatever, but later they're going to think about that. Those are the seeds we want to keep planting in our kids, especially if you have a kiddo who's the bully, especially if you have a kiddo who lies a lot or steals or sneaks, things. We want to give them every opportunity to show that they can be trustworthy. That's my make it right technique, that they can be kind, that they can be giving and helpful and a friend. So again, giving the problem as much attention, the natural kind of logical consequences that follow. Kids do need to learn from consequences. It teaches cause and effect and right and wrong. All those things still need to happen, but we don't have to do it in a drill sergeant way. We don't have to do it in I'm going to teach you a lesson kind of way. We want all of that to come from the inside out, which is where change the conversation comes into play.
Incredible. Oh my gosh, that breakdown and then even the examples paint that really clear picture of how we can kind of reframe some of those moments and also recognize where we are in that. It's not just about the child noodling on the floor at Target, right? Like it's like, okay, how am I going to be in control of myself and regulate myself in this moment to then be able to just take a step back and observe, let them experience whatever they're experiencing, and then we can move on. So
yeah,
that's
for sure. Can I give you my favorite technique to start with?
Please. Yes, all ears.
It's absolutely free. We all have access to this. Anywhere we are, wherever we are. And it's simply, now this is going to sound woo-woo to some people, right? Because there's all this mind body work and everything out there. But I learned this about a month or so after I started my own company, and panic set in. Like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? I left a 20-year wonderful career, and I started my own company. Now, where am I getting clients? How is this going to work? Like all the fluffy stuff of starting the company and all the excitement quickly turned, and I became really tense and really stressed. And I had an 8-year-old at the time. who was a wonderful kid, but everybody has challenges, right? And so I was getting irritable and all the things. And I learned this technique and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be a game changer. If this works in 6 seconds, this is going to be a game changer." All it is, put your hand on your heart, hand on your stomach,
Mm.
and get yourself to breathe. 6 seconds. Really only 2 or 3 breaths is all you need. But here's the catch, Jessica. I couldn't catch a breath.
Wow.
I did that. I had to learn to do this because I was so amped. I was so tense that it was like, I just have to make this right. I just have to fix this. I just have to solve this. I just have to, we should on ourselves and we have to do all the things. I couldn't. Now when I do it, I can't help but catch a breath because I have trained my central nervous system to know, oh, she's doing this. We're going to take this deep breath. Stomach goes out when you breathe in. And when you exhale, your stomach goes in. And you do that for just 3 seconds. The extra bonus of having your hand right on your chest is that in a tense situation when you're ready to be like, kid, and you're at them, and you're lashing and you're moving forward and maybe there's a finger pointing, that this actually makes you go back. Hold on. See, I took another deep breath. I'm not trying to do that. It's just naturally happening now, but it didn't at first. I'm telling you, I had to practice. And so this literally is a game changer because in those tense moments, eventually you do it enough, you'll naturally do it. It won't seem goofy or weird or awkward or whatever. Your kids notice, they pay attention, they actually start doing it. They
Incredible.
actually start doing it because you're modeling that, right? But oftentimes we find we didn't even need a response. Maybe the kid just lashed out. Maybe the kid just had a minute. They were stressed. They didn't even mean to say what they just said, but they had a rough day too. And we forget that our kids have long, rough days too. They get hangry. They get out of sorts. They just need a mental health day, but they're 5 and we don't know they need a mental health day, or they're 12 and we don't know they need a mental health day. And so again, just enough to just get your poop in a group, just relax a sec. And then do I need to respond? Once you do this, you shift from the back part, fight, flight, or freeze part of your brain, that warning, 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 incoming danger part of your brain, to your prefrontal cortex. This 6-second pause, it's called, will actually shift you to the front part of your brain, logic part of your brain, so you can decide rationally, is this something I need to handle and solve right now? Or is this something that can wait? Too often we think we have to solve everything in the moment, like you were asking before.
Yeah.
We don't. Sometimes you can say, you know what? I'm spitting tax right now. I am so upset by this. I don't even know how I'm going to handle it. I'm going to get back to you later. I'm going to get back to you before bed. I'm going to get back to you tomorrow. For a teenager, it's a few days, maybe a week. I'm not sure. But life goes on in the meanwhile. Parents will say, well, aren't they getting away with it then? They're going to maybe seem like they are, but you're going to come back to it. You're going to circle back to it and make sure you solve it, but just not in the heat of the emotional moment.
That
So,
makes a lot
yeah.
of sense. Yeah. Oh
Super
my goodness.
easy, super free. Yeah. Yep. Good
Well,
stuff.
we have a couple questions too from families, and I think you've mentioned a couple of these scenarios too, so I might skip over one. But the first question that we have is, my kid has a meltdown every time we leave the house, and I'm exhausted. What can I do?
Yeah. So, oh gosh, God bless that mama or daddy who's ever dealing with that. I would say I've got about 15 different ideas. And isn't that the thing too? Like when one works one day, it doesn't work the next day, or then you have to have 3 or 4 other things. So sometimes it's a matter of that we're leaving at this time and you do like, okay, we're going at this time, get your shoes on, and then we're leaving. For this particular situation, I'm going to say what they need to do is say, yep, you don't want to go. I hear you. And we're going. You're going to walk by yourself or I'm going to help you. But you just have to go, right? Because oftentimes, and especially if it's happening every time we leave the house, sometimes you want to prescribe it to the kiddo and you want to say, hey, we're going to be leaving soon. You better start, it might be time for you to throw your fit. I know you're not going to want to go. We're going to be leaving soon. And giving them permission to throw the fit. Maybe it's the first time all day they did something you asked them to do. So when they throw the fit, you can say, hey, I thought you were going to throw a fit. I know it upsets you. Now, you're not sarcastic and overly happy about it, but you're matter of fact, like, oh, I figured this was going to happen. And we're going.
Yeah.
And enough times, enough repetition of doing that without you. Here's the key, though. All right. It's not just about the technique, because I'm sure this parent has tried lots of techniques. Maybe many of them worked with their other children and just is not working for this particular one, right? So, first, what we have to do is change our presentation of how we're handling that. Because if the kiddo kind of knows that this is, well, how is mom or dad going to respond when I throw this fit? Are they going to be stressed? Are they going to be negotiating, bargaining, bribing, frustrated, yelling, doing all that? Sometimes kids will just want that attention because it's attention, even if it's negative attention, but it might be like they're getting a lot of attention around this particular behavior. So they're going to keep doing it because they're getting mom's attention where the other kids don't get it at that time of the day. So when mom focuses more on the other kids and goes through the motions of getting this kiddo in the car or on the bus or wherever, whatever you're doing, the kid eventually is going to want to do whatever the other kids are doing to get that kind of attention. And mom's just going to go through the motions of getting the kiddo in the car. And it's not going to look pretty and it's not going to be calm, but she's going to get her done and
Yeah.
not pour in extra emotion into it and think about, what am I doing wrong with this kid? Why is this not working? Why does my kid not like me? What is, and feeding all that stinking thinking into her brain and over giving that problem more attention than it deserves. You're prepared for the worst. Your kid doesn't want to go. They're going to throw a meltdown, throw a fit or have a fit. Just talk about it in the moment. Notice it. What's happening? Oh, I know we're leaving. So this is when you throw a fit. I know one day you won't. Today's not that day. Let's go. Oh, you're kicking and screaming. You kind of talk yourself through it as it's happening. I do that with kids. I teach parents with babies. You're changing a baby's diaper and they're arching their back and they're turning and they're kicking and they're fighting. I'm telling the kid what they're doing, the baby, what they're doing as they're doing it in a kind of a lilt voice, like a little bit of a sing-songy voice almost, where my energy going out is, even though it's not pretty and we're struggling a little bit, right? The energy I'm putting into it is not one of nervousness, frustration, irritability, anger, or fear. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, this is a tough one and this is hard and we're going to get through it. And then when we get done, we go, oh, we did it. Sometimes when a kid has a really big screamer at the end of it, after they, wipe the snot from their nose and their eyes are wiped and they're, kind of chilled out, I'll say something like, especially if I felt overwhelmed in that moment, right? Because it was a big one for me. I might say something like, whew, that was a big one. And high five them and say, but we did it. They might not high five back, but I'm going to do it like as
Love
if
that.
they are. And I'm going to say, oh, we made it through that one. And then I'm going to keep her moving and bring up a different subject about a different thing because our life is going to go on and that problem's only getting that little bit of attention, right? Meeting their needs, not making fun, not being sarcastic, not bribing, not threatening with a bunch of things they're not going to be able to do that we're never going to follow through with because we won't remember or won't have time or we're too tired. So just get through the moment and it will pass.
Yeah, I have an interesting story too for that one. Because as I mentioned, I have 6 kiddos, and my second kiddo, it was always that was the situation for us. Is that it was like, okay, we can't get out the door because every single time is like he's hiding, he doesn't want to leave. And then I think you had mentioned earlier in our conversation today too that behavior is often just like the surface level, right? And you have to get to the root. And so one of the things that we did is we started talking about it and like practicing when we weren't all leaving. So we would just go to the store, just him and I. Um, and still the same issue where he wouldn't want to go, or like there was still some sort of like clunkiness in the process of leaving. And it turned out that it was because it was overwhelming for him to try to find his shoes. Like we have a big family
Oh,
and
sure.
the shoes are like unorganized, which happens when kids don't put their shoes back in the exact cubby, right? But it's
Right.
overwhelming for him, and so we were able to have a conversation about, like, well, how can we fix that? And he ended up deciding that he's just gonna leave his shoes in the car, and then we haven't had that issue.
Oh,
Like, he's like,
perfect.
he knows what to expect. Um,
And
so
isn't that interesting how kids will come when you do things like that, kids will come up with the answer themselves. They just don't often think that we're going to be game for it, like we'll
yeah,
approve that or even taking the time. Organization is so key too. And especially when you have a lot of kids. I mean, But let's be honest, 2 kids can be a lot of kids for a single mom, or a two-parent home, but dad, is home getting them to daycare, mom's already gone at work or whatever it is, right? So
Mhm.
so it doesn't matter the volume or the number of kids all the time. I've had families with 6 or 8 kids where their home runs like clockwork and everybody's got their chore and everybody's doing their and it's meticulous. And then two-parent or two kiddo homes where life's a disaster, right? Because there's a lot of clutter and the kids just aren't. So, but I organization is absolutely key, and there's different ways to get there, and organization looks different for different families. A family where the parents are ADHD and the kids are ADHD, that organization is going to look a lot different than a family who's got more OCD or type A kind of tendencies, right? We got to figure, that's getting to the root of things too, right? We got to figure out what works for you and what works best for your family. But yeah, I love one of the guests on one of my podcasts years ago. She cued me into those sweater shelves that hang in your closet, those expandable shelves, and then putting the kiddos every outfit or the shoes or whatever every day of the week into those things. And it's and homework and permission slips and snacks, pre-wrapped snacks or things like that they can, and then picking out the clothes for the week versus every morning or every night or whatever. So yeah, there's lots of fun tips and tricks.
Yeah, that one just made me think of that too, is like at some point, like you can get through the moment and then also consider like, okay, coming back to it, right? Like what is the root?
Yeah.
What's happening if it keeps happening over and over? Maybe there's something more too, with that
Well,
pattern.
and one of the things that I teach the make it right technique, although I think today we're going to talk more about like the 60 ways download. Did I give you that one maybe for a freebie?
We can talk
Um,
about whatever you want.
Well, anybody can go to noproblemparents.com and reach out and find these things. But the make it right technique is a really awesome opportunity for after a kid has caused a problem for somebody else. Um, or done something they shouldn't have done and caused a problem for themselves, and we can come back and do the 5-step make it right technique, which we don't have time to go into all of it today. But what happens from that is often the kid coming back and saying, but I just wanted to, or if I just could have, because it's slowing us down enough to have a conversation with our kid while still acknowledging that even if they were misunderstood or like he was struggling because it was too chaotic for him to get his shoes. If he still caused mom to be late or caused a problem, we're still going to have him make it right or make it up to mom because it caused this problem, right? And so it's teaching him random acts of kindness. It's teaching more than just sorry. And then, we teach kids to say sorry, and then they go out like nothing really is repaired or learned by saying sorry, especially in the heat of the moment if they're not really sorry. And so we want to acknowledge that even sometimes as adults, well, a lot of times as adults, we don't intend to hurt somebody's feelings or make a mistake at work or, you know, do whatever it is. But when we do screw up, it's not that you're in trouble all the time. It's that you screwed up or you messed up or you made a mistakes, and mistakes are learning opportunities. And so let's get our kids to be less afraid of getting in trouble and more about, oh man, I screwed up. And how can I make it up to you, mom? Or how can I make it up to you, friend at school? Or, what can I do to make it right? So there's some resolution in that. And then again, we keep her moving.
Sounds incredibly humanizing. Like, yeah, we all make mistakes. We're all gonna mess up. And then what matters more is how we handle it after that, right? It's like
Yes.
there's no way to avoid making a mistake in life. And so that feels very human. Like, okay, I can see you as your little 7-year-old trying to navigate life. And, I am in my 30s and I'm trying to figure it out too. So right here, I'm gonna make it right. Then model that. Oh, I love that. Well,
Yeah.
before we close out, how can families like work with you? Where should they go? What resources do you have? Any specific programs that they could take advantage of?
Yeah, absolutely. No Problem Parents with an S on the end, noproblemparents.com has everything on it. Okay. So they can go to noproblemparents.com and they can learn how to join the Nest, which is our most popular program. It is a group coaching program. It fits in your daily schedule. You can join it live a couple times a month, or you can watch the recordings. You get all the materials and the app. So you've got everything right at your fingertips on your phone. And then there's also resources for the podcast on there and one-on-one coaching if you feel like you need it. But I always encourage parents to start with the nest. There's lots of videos in there. The PDFs are in there. There's just tons of information. Yeah.
Incredible. Like all in one spot too. So it feels very like accessible for busy parents that are trying to do it all at the same time, but also really want to focus on their family. Before we go, any lasting advice that you would give to a parent who's feeling a little lost and wants to turn things around? What's one like actionable step or something that they can do with their family today or tomorrow?
I want you to first give yourself grace. And I don't say this lightly. I am not a fluffy parenting style. I am not a white picket fence, sugarcoat. I like gentle parenting and positive parenting, but that's not me. Like my mindset shift will help those programs even work better for you if you're not finding success with them. But it is to give yourself some grace and to really spend a little bit of time each day on yourself and remembering how you got here, whether you planned on having the kiddos or you didn't plan, or you took some kiddos in and you went, oh gosh, we didn't know what we were, getting into. Like whatever your family looks like or that makeup is, you are the leader. And so just like you would if you're a manager, supervisor, CEO, whatever of a company, you need to make sure that you are pouring into yourself first, getting the right support, an advocate, the validation that you need, and giving yourself some grace. And so I'd leave you with this is my favorite quote. If you got a really chaotic home or lots of things going on, or you're in the sandwich generation parenting your parents as well as your kiddos or whatever it is, I want you to think about on particularly rough days when you feel like you cannot possibly endure. I want you to remember that your track record for getting through those days so far is 100%. And I'd say that's pretty darn good. So we need to acknowledge ourselves more in all the things that we are doing and we have dealt with and overcome already. You are the expert of your child. You just need to believe that, and I can help you get there.
My gosh, my heart is so full from this conversation, Jaci. Thank you so much for sharing your energy, tools, and your heart with us today. You've helped so many parents stop spiraling and really start leading. And this episode is definitely going to be one that we keep coming back to again and again. To all of our listeners, you don't need a script, you just need a mindset shift. Jaci's here to help. So check the show notes for her resources, information on joining the Nest and getting all of the access to the resources in the app. And of course, all of the other ways that you can connect with No Problem Parenting. And remember, you're not a perfect parent, you're a practicing one, and that's more than enough. Until next time, we're right here with you.